Thank you for coming out to see your local government at work tonight. We're going to start our formal meeting off with the Pledge of Allegiance, as always, led by some scout troops that I'm going to ask Councilmember Fowler to tell us their numbers, and then we'll do the allegiance and you can introduce them.
So our Pledge of Allegiance will be led by troops numbers 3084 and 3071 from the Sugar House area.
Please stand with us.
Color guard, attention, forward march. Color guard, post the colors. Will the audience please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 2. Color guards dismissed. The audience may be seated.
All right, guys, you guys aren't done yet. So if we could have our two troops from the Sugar House area come on up and introduce yourselves into that microphone right up there. Just give us your name and what school you're at and why you enjoy being with Scouts.
Hi, my name is Isaac, and I go to William Penn. And why I like Scouts is because you can be adventurous and learn new things.
Go Penguins.
My name is Mason. I am from Dilworth Elementary. My favorite thing about Scouts is the activities and helping others.
My name is Crew Miner. I go to Dilworth, and the reason I enjoy Scouts is because you get to meet new friends, and adventuring is so fun with other people, learning about new things, and yeah.
My name is Matthew. I go to Dilworth Elementary School. I like about Scouts because you get to explore.
My name is Kai Skinlow, and I go to Dilworth Elementary School, and what I like about Scouting is that we could learn new opportunities and activities.
My name is Owen Chamberlain. I go to Dilworth Elementary School. I'm in 5th grade, and what I like about Scouting is you can be helpful to others and learn new things.
My name is Matt Nelson. I go to Dilworth, and I like the activities and helping others in Scouts.
And I won't make the troop leaders come up and give their names, but I would introduce Richard Nelson, Clark Chamberlain, and Darren O as the troop leaders for these guys. And guys, thanks so much for coming out today and leading us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Fowler, and to our Scouts. It's always a nice way to start our formal meeting, so we appreciate you being here tonight. Next, I'm just going to review our standards of conduct. In case anybody hasn't been here before, I'll let you know that this is the only room in this amazing building that's still used for its original intended purposes of lawmaking. It's a historic room. The painting over there is historic. Even some of the chairs are original to the room. So we ask that you respect the place, and then additionally that you respect each other. So we ask that during our public hearings tonight, of which we have 5 before our general comment hearing, no cheering, jeering, booing, not even clapping. We don't want people to feel intimidated to give their side of an opinion on any of these subjects. So we appreciate you being respectful to the building and the furniture, but also to each other. If you have a piece of paper or some information that you'd like us to have, when you want to give your public comment, just let us know, and Cindy Lou over here, our staff, or another one of our staff members will get that from you and distribute it to us, because we only have 2 minutes for public comment, and we want you to be able to use all of those 2 minutes to speak to us. So with that, I'm going to look for a motion to approve some minutes.
So moved.
Do you want to say which ones? Or I'll tell you, it's Tuesday, November 20th, 2018.
Move for approval.
We got a motion by Councilmember Rogers and a second by Councilmember Luke. Any discussion to this motion? All those in favor? Aye. And any opposed? That passes, and we're on to the public hearing section. B1 is an ordinance for 1332 and 1334 East, 500 South rezone. This is, let's see, we've had two, this is our second public hearing on this one, right? Okay. Looks like I have some cards coming up. I'm going to call you by twos. First person, please come up. Second one, be ready to come up immediately after. Reverend, Mary Rossi. Reverend Rossi, will you tell me how to pronounce your first name? I'm sorry, I couldn't quite read that. Followed by Roger Lamoni.
It's Mareka
Mareka, thank you.
Rossi.
Thank you.
You ready for me?
We're ready for you.
Okay. I thank you for hearing us today again on this issue. I am a board member both at Mount Olivet Cemetery and Friendship Manor. I'm mainly speaking for Mount Olivet tonight. I sent all of you a letter. I hope that you received it. Mainly says that we are very concerned about the parking issue on this piece of land that will have 10 units according to this plan. I think that this is still the plan that everybody has, is that right? Anyway, according to that, there will only be 10 parking spaces. Also, to get out of some of those parking spaces, it looks like you're going to have to back all the way out if all the spaces are full. So that means you're going to have to back out onto 5th South. So we're very concerned about parking, people coming in and out once this is built. Especially during the building, though, is that there is no possibility that they can build this without use of our space unless they go into 5th South, which I think that probably won't be allowed because it's a state road. I spoke to a commercial real estate agent and asked him several months ago what the property was worth, and he told me that he thought it was worth about $50,000 before we saw any of this, and I asked him why. He said the zoning doesn't provide for, he said basically the lot lines are set in such a way that they cannot construct without being on your property, which you aren't willing to allow. The zoning doesn't provide for use for a reason. The adjacent users aren't in keeping with what they are asking. Sorry, I'm not sure exactly what that means. The area isn't conducive to this use as they won't provide enough parking and the people will default to your land. The owners should have to provide a guard for the parking in perpetuity to make sure that it doesn't affect your parking.
Time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Rossi. Roger Lamoni, followed by Rendell Mabey.
Yes, good evening. My name is Roger Lamoni. I'm the president of the Board of Trustees for Friendship Manor. I wasn't able to be at the previous meeting, so thank you for having a second public hearing. We submitted a letter to your information packet yesterday. You may have not had time to read through it. Myself and some others tonight will be hitting some highlights of our concerns. Just a little background on us. Friendship Manor houses about 200 senior and disabled residents, so we are speaking for our residents. Our role as a board is to safeguard their quality of life as well as their safety. We are likely the first affordable housing nonprofit in Utah and in Salt Lake City, so we've been there a long time. Some others will talk about more our safety concerns again, but I wanted to clarify some items that may have been misrepresented at the last meeting. We have actually made overtures to purchase that lot several times for the past 3 years and have really never received a response. Our proposal has always been to purchase that as green space for our residents and perhaps a community garden. And we have already researched some Wasatch Community Garden possibilities. So we have been, there's also some talk about how we were unresponsive. One thing I should note is our business office is open every day from 8 to 4, Monday through Friday. Our last conversation with one of the members of Decade Homes was on September 5th, when we replied that we could not, at the time, being a HUD property, move fast enough to accept their offer of an assisted living facility, which seemed last minute to us. And as you know, in the federal government, that would take several years long proposal. We did offer again to buy the property at fair market value.
Thank you, Mr. Lamoni. Rendell Maybe is up next, followed by Tom Barnum. Barman, pardon me.
Hi, I'm a resident of Friendship Manor, and I'm concerned that this proposed development would increase unnecessarily and unreasonably the already heavy foot and vehicle traffic in our parking lot and surrounding the building. The other night, I came home, I drove home after the U football game had started to discover that somebody had parked in my reserved parking place in Friendship Manor. Especially when there are university events, the parking problem is very heavy, and it's not uncommon for people just to try to come in and park and take our places. Additionally, my wife is handicapped, and a lot of the residents at Friendship Manor are handicapped. They're in the area, they're on the sidewalks, in the parking lot. I think this might increase the safety problem.
Thank you, Mr. Maybe. Tom Barnum is up, followed by Louise Ewing.
My name is Tom Barman. I am an officer of the Friendship Manor Residents Association, and am therefore speaking on behalf of the 200 residents of Friendship Manor. There has been much discussion among Manor residents in the several months that this has been an issue of which we are aware. And this is a vulnerable community, as Mr. Maybe has already defined, and approximately 1/3 of the residents of Friendship Manor are either quite elderly, using wheelchairs or walkers, or in some other way handicapped. And because of the layout of Friendship Manor, whereby the open public spaces are accessed by residents through the parking lot, Friendship Manor residents are very concerned that the proposed building will inevitably increase traffic through the parking lot. While this is a problem already, it is ameliorated to some degree by the fact that people using the parking lot are, for the most part, people who are familiar with Friendship Manor as a building and familiar with the parking lot because they are regular users either of the facilities within Friendship Manor or the nearby Unitarian Church. But it is used by those people as a thoroughfare because there are entrances to the parking lot on both 5th South and 13th. And we are very concerned that a building of the size that is being recommended here will increase the traffic through the parking lot, both looking for parking, which they're not entitled to, and through the parking lot as a conduit between the two streets. I would finally say that while it is clear that the builders are proposing to have substantial enough facilities for parking that they are expecting not to use the space in Friendship Manor, it seems inevitable to all of us, given the very small size of the space for which the exception is being requested, that it will inevitably lead to further dangers for our vulnerable population. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barman. Louise Ewing up next, followed by Charles Pioli.
Hello, I'm Louise Ewing, and I'm a member of First Unitarian Church, and I'm also recently a trustee on the board at Friendship Manor. And I would like to briefly convey some of the thoughts that Tom Goldsmith, a minister at First Unitarian Church, shared. He was sorry he couldn't do more than this because of the time constraints. But as you probably know, First Unitarian Church shares the parking lot with Friendship Manor. He wrote, "The residents at Friendship Manor, whom I visit regularly each month, are vehemently opposed to building on that slim piece of property. Building a commercial space there would also adversely affect First Unitarian Church's use of the parking lot. The parking lot, used by the church and CCNS Cooperative Preschool, has only 2 ways in and out, and the apartment would greatly inhibit the flow of traffic, causing danger to pedestrians everywhere. I regret that I learn only now that a letter is needed from the church to go to the City Council. I have run out of time. Hope someone else can write the letter, or that there's another way we can support Friendship Manor in resisting this idiotic plan." I'd like to add to that Decade Development's plan seems to hope to accommodate 28 individuals. There are 10 units, but 8 of them are three-people units, and 2 of them are 2-people units. So there's 28 individuals sharing 10 parking spaces. And then there's also the hope for a retail component, which would require, one would think, parking for employees and possibly customers. So, and there's no available space for at least 670 feet along 13th South and 13th East and 5th South on
Time.
either side. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ewing. Charles Pioli is up next, followed by Susan Olson.
Good evening. My name's Charles Pioli, and I generated this map. You don't have to look at it now, but if you would at some point. I'm a concerned citizen who believes that public safety is one of the primary goals of our government. And I understand that if this piece of property is rezoned, that they expect patrons of tracks and students to go over there and use it, residents and the commercial part. So I wondered, how long will it take to walk over to this piece of property from the track station? So I got my stopwatch, I went, walked over, headed over to the 5th South, turned right, went down to 13th East, walked across the street, went up to the piece of property. That took me 4 minutes and 50 seconds, almost a quarter mile. I didn't account for waiting for the light, which at 10 o'clock in the morning took between 0 and 2 minutes and 37 seconds. If we add that, half of that time waiting for the light, that would take 6 minutes to walk over to this piece of property from the stadium track station. The other alternative is to walk over to 5th South. That takes about 1 minute to stop, look for traffic, hop, skip, and jump across 6 lanes of traffic and a median, and I'm at the point of business in 1 minute and 30 seconds. My question is, when you have students who are going to use this for residents, when you have patrons on tracks who may go get a cup of coffee to go to Sandy on their trip to home, when you have human nature, what are people going to do? Are they going to walk across 5th South, or are they going to take 6 minutes? I contend they will take 1.5 minutes walking across after they've done it one time. We know that this is true. All track stations are either put at the end of a block where there's a crosswalk, or on Main Street and on North Temple, they have traffic signals right across from the station to take patrons from the track station to a point of business.
Time.
This does not exist at this space, and I hope that you will deny this zoning due to safety reasons.
Thank you, Mr. Pioli. Susan Olson is up next, followed by Ian Kaplan.
Good evening. My name's Susan Olson, and I'm also a member of the Board of Trustees of Friendship Manor. I just wanted to say a little bit more about the building, the residents of Friendship Manor. We are 178 units, approximately half of which are HUD subsidized. So half of our residents pay only 30% of their income to live there, and the other half who pay market rates are people who have chosen to live in a mixed income community. So I think this is not a stereotypical case of people in a fancy high-rise who are trying to protect their privileges. We heard at the Planning Commission meeting that there had been a discussion and vote, in fact, by the East Central Community Council, and if that is the case, I just wanted to get it on the record that we had no notice of that meeting, and so we had no opportunity to interact with the developers in the context of the Community Council. And although we did, thanks to the Planning Commission, we did get notice of the Planning Commission meeting itself. We feel that the language in the proposal is, you know, ideals that many of us believe in about urban development, about creating gathering places for meetings and for socializing, but we are concerned that the proposal and the Planning Commission's endorsement of it do not take into consideration some of the practical realities that others have testified about the vulnerability of the residents of Friendship Manor and of the safety hazard created by putting a coffee shop in that location across from a very busy intersection. So thank you. We ask you not to approve the rezoning.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Ian Kaplan is up next, followed by Levi Thatcher, and Levi's card is the last one I have. If you would like to speak to this, raise your hand and we'll bring you a card. Mr. Kaplan.
Hi, everyone. First and foremost, I want to thank the council for their time spent on this project up to this point. I prepared a brief account of my experience working on this lot, and I'll read it aloud tonight, and then I've also attached a copy to my speaker slip, which should be navigating here. My name is Ian Kaplan. I'm the owner of Ad Virtue Design and Development. I represent the architecture and development team for this proposal. Personally, I'm an architect first and a developer second, so that means I prioritize all of my decisions based on their potential for positive impact in our local communities and the urban environment. Before and during the process of this application, several meetings were held with representatives from City Council, Community Council, Friendship Manor, and First Unitarian. During those meetings, several ideas were discussed as to how this development could support the needs and address the concerns of Friendship Manor and First Unitarian. Prior to the last public hearing, we were under the impression that their voices had been heard and their concerns had been addressed. With a new understanding, I'd like to clarify just a few things. First, our intent for designating the property as a mixed-use zone with a commercial use. RMU 45 is a down zone from the current RMF 75 zoning, and it's the only medium-density zoning designation that will allow for multifamily housing on this size parcel. Our proposed commercial use is primarily a residential lobby. Our intent is to have a small coffee vendor there to serve mostly the residents of our building and any pedestrian traffic that's going to be passing through on 500 South to the university. I recognize the concerns of increased traffic in the Friendship Manor parking lot. I'd like to clarify that we do not need access to their property in order to develop and operate our parcel. Landscaping and fencing will physically separate us, and our leasing agreement, in addition to signage on our property, will prohibit the use of their lot by residents of our facility. To address parking concerns, we're addressing opportunity for mass transit. We're encouraging alternate means of transportation by providing secured bike and scooter parking. And we have started conversations with Hive Pass to explore a subsidized pass for all of our future residents of the facility. As a development team, we're set on having an open dialogue with all involved parties. If the council or the concerned citizens in this room today have any additional questions for me, I encourage you to please reach out. Thank you again for your time this evening, and I look forward to working with you in the future to positively contribute to the growth of Salt Lake City. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Levi Thatcher, followed by Esther Hunter.
Esteemed Council, Mayor's Office, thanks for your time. If we imagine a future for our kids that is walkable, if we imagine a future where we have clean air that doesn't make us wince all winter, if we imagine a future where chronic disease is reduced by being able to walk to errands, to groceries, to jobs, this future, as you well know, doesn't come out of thin air. It's by incremental decisions in dense infill like this that allows our children to be able to afford to live near us, near their jobs, near their schools. And so I would encourage you to take the long view and to think about the safety implications of people being in cars versus being on transit. Being on a train or a bus is much safer if we're thinking about mortality rates than being in a vehicle. And I would encourage you and thank you for your time and debating these matters, and appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Thatcher. Esther Hunter. And Esther's card is the last one I have. Again, if you'd like to speak, raise your hand and we'll bring you a card.
Hi, I'm Esther Hunter. I'm Chair of East Central Community Council. As such, we represent all of the residents of Friendship Manor. We are concerned about the First Unitarian Church. We're concerned about the preschool. We're concerned about pedestrian safety. We are highly impacted because of our location by the university, by the traffic on most of the arterials that are near us, and so we face these kinds of issues all the time. We also have a lot of bullseyes on our area due to the zoning that's very patchworked in our area. It doesn't necessarily clearly identify what should be kept and what should be torn down. So we face these kind of issues all the time. Beginning in April, we worked with all of these parties to talk about what we could do to mitigate all of the concerns, including parking, safety. We've begun discussions again with the state on the timing on 5th South. We have been very much seeing what we could do to mitigate, to allow this kind of development that is a down zone from what's actually in the master plan, and at the same time protect our residents and citizens. Parking is always going to be an issue, and so it's an important thing to try and come up with varied solutions, which we feel that this developer has done. We also are very pleased with his approach. Their approach as a team, usually we're out with pitchforks and we're working on things for a while. In this case, there was a very positive, responsive approach, and I believe that that can continue with concerns that we want to address. We have been reaching out to Friendship Manor, especially due to the amount of folks that have spoken. We've talked to Sarah. I've probably left 6 additional messages for Roger. Have not always had return phone calls on some of those situations, but we hope that we can do that. We can't just automatically include people's email on our email list without them giving permission. So we need Friendship Manor to actually include their emails and allow us to include us on their email list, and we can get them all included. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hunter. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this public hearing? Come on up, tell us your name, and we'll collect the card from you after.
Yeah, my name is Jake Albin. I'm also involved with Decade Homes and AdVirtue. The only thing that I wish to portray is that we have approached this from the get-go of a way that we're not trying to go around someone or do something that's going to hurt the residents in the area. We have, as Esther stated, started conversations very early, and we certainly have tried to work through conversations and make sure that we could provide options for assisted living if that was something that we were trying to brainstorm with them as a community. Again, we're certainly not trying to single anyone out. We're trying to brainstorm as a community as what is going to help everyone involved, which we've tried to do from the get-go, and there has been some lack of communication, which has made it difficult. I know that they said they are somewhat in a position now to do that, which we have not been aware of since we were told that they would not be able to purchase at the time. But again, we're just coming at a position where we want to build the community up and not just try to be the so-called developers and build what we'd like. Again, we are in the parking, we are under every code that there is. We're not going exceeding what the code is asking, so we're well within those limits, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, and if you could give your card to one of them, thank you. Anyone else who wants to speak on this issue? Then I'm going to look for a motion to close the public hearing. Oh, I've got one more. Okay, never mind. Anyone want to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I motion that we close this public hearing and defer action to a future council meeting.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Wharton, a second by Councilmember Fowler. Any discussion to the motion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes. We're set to take action on that item next Tuesday, December 11th. So we're on to item B2, which is our ordinance for FBUN2 building height zoning text amendment. Paul Johnson is here to speak to that. It's the only card that I have, and I wanted to mention that during our work session today, we had a dialogue with the applicant, Mr. Alfondre, and took a straw poll that we would be kicking this back to the Planning Commission probably add a few months to the process just to make sure that all the parcels were included, but we absolutely still have a public hearing tonight. So Mr. Johnson, please give us 2 minutes of your time. If anyone else wants to speak, raise your hand, we'll bring you a card.
Good evening, Council and Mayor's Office. My name is Paul Johnson. I'm a homeowner resident and board member of the Central Ninth Community Council, which I'm here to speak on behalf of. In addition to the email you previously received in your packet from our board president, Mary Gordon, expressing the Central Ninth community's enthusiastic approval of this request, which came about from direct interaction with Mr. Alfondre. The Central Ninth neighborhood is the first where Salt Lake City has implemented form-based zoning. Form-based zoning, as you know, is intended to encourage mixed-use, high-density, walkable neighborhoods. The linchpin of this plan in Central Ninth, in addition to major developments such as this one, is the completion of streetscape improvements on 900 South between West Temple and 300 West that will extend the 9 line, add bicycle lanes, widen sidewalks, reconfigure parking to double the number of available spaces, and provide green space areas. The funds for completing this project have been allocated. We hope that as the city moves forward on implementing the development and density pieces of the form-based zoning, it also moves forward on implementing the streetscape improvements that are crucial to creating the safe, vibrant, walkable neighborhood envisioned by this plan. We are very excited for the projects and improvements happening in our neighborhood and excited to continue working with the City Council to make them happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Anyone else wants to speak to the FBUN2 building height zoning text amendment? Raise your hand. Otherwise, I'll look for a motion.
Madam Chair, I move the council close the public hearing and refer the petition back to the Planning Commission to review and provide a recommendation on the new information provided by the applicant.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Fowler, a second by Councilmember Wharton. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes. We're going to move on to B3, our ordinance for 230 West, 200 South zoning amendment, which is Block 67, Phase 2. I have a couple cards here. Troy Watanabe, followed by Jill Sweet. Troy, will you tell me if I said your name wrong?
It's Troy Watanabe.
Watanabe, thank you.
Thank you for all being here and listening to us. I know that you guys go through it. I could never have your job. I don't know what you guys, crazy. I am the Salt Lake Buddhist. I am the president of the Salt Lake Buddhist Temple and also a minister's assistant. I'm speaking on behalf of the Japanese Community Preservation Committee. Because of the announcement of the convention hotel at the Salt Palace, it is the JCPC, or the Japanese Community Preservation Committee's thought that we see no reason for a D1 zoning in the Block 67 area because of the sight lines and everything. You're already going to have a convention hotel on the next block. We don't feel that we need that D1 there. Also, the JCPC feels that we see no need for an overlay too on the D4 zoning because of the height. The additional height will probably encroach on the sight lines that are there now to the properties that are existing. And we believe that developments that have happened in the past have encroached on our sight lines and have encroached on the Japanese community. So we believe it is in our interests that you don't vote for any of the height requirements for the overlay or the D1. And we hope that you consider our interests in making your decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watanabe. Jill Sweet is up next, followed by Tim Funk. Tim's card is the last one I have, so raise your hand if you'd like to speak to this one.
Hi, I'm grateful to hear that you all appreciate, as a city council, the building and the significance of this room, the historic significance of this room that you pointed out. I'm the owner of the building, the historic building, the Hills House Antique Gallery at 126 South, 200 West, which was Louis B. Hill's building, original building. And I sent a note to Molly Robinson that I wanted to send to all of you, and I'm not sure if you received anything received my comments on that, but I'd like to, if I could, find it here. 1 second. I know I was going to read this to you. About my building. The city council needs to know that the impact of the petition to build higher on my building will have a terrible effect. With the petitioner's construction, excavation, and demolition, the historic building probably will not survive. And I believe that the city council needs to consider this greatly before they make a decision on this. I know that there is talk that they want to go under the ground for underground parking. I don't know if this has been brought up to you yet. That will affect my building in a big way, and I just fear for the structure of this historic building, for the reverence that my husband had it for 40 years, and is on the historical, it is a historical marker building. I just hope that this can be somehow protected, if possible. So I plead for protection of that building also.
Thank you, Ms. Sweet.
Thank you.
Tim Funk is the final card I have on this item.
Hi. I've been working in the neighborhood, the multi-ethnic neighborhood as we know it, for 40 years. I was a key part of getting the multi-ethnic senior high-rise built. And the issues we had then are the same issues they have now. What is the heritage of the neighborhood? They want to build on the corner, the southeast corner of that block, a 375-foot building. It couldn't fit inside the Rose Bowl, let alone the University of Utah. 375 feet high. It doesn't have to be that high. If they build a building at 375 feet, it will isolate the Japanese Community Church, it will isolate the Buddhist temple, it will isolate the multi-ethnic senior high-rise, and that's not even to mention the 50-unit Jackson Apartments that are on the corner of the southeast, the southwest corner. This is a very temperamental neighborhood, and this is an oversized, unnecessarily large complex that they want to build there. You should take a look at the transportation. I used to be a transportation planner in a former life. I don't like to admit that, but I was. And the transportation east to west, or northwest to south, if you want to call it that, that alley that comes through the complex there, there's 6.75 acres, is really, really a difficult thing to look at. And you should have your professional, you should have your traffic people look at that. If they haven't, they should, and you really should have a professional traffic planner look at that as an independent opinion. There are multiple problems with that property. You have heard from the Japanese community on this in every hearing you've had, and I'm surprised they only have one person here tonight. This is what you can make it or not make it, but you really need to referee this one a lot better.
Thank you, Mr. Funk. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak to this particular one? Come on up, remind us of your name, and please fill out a card afterward.
Hi, I'm Levi Thatcher. Thanks so much for your time. Imagine how long this building will stand, 40, 45, 50 years, and imagine the population growth we're anticipating and excited for in Salt Lake City, and imagine the scarcity of housing in 40 years with that population growth, and think of the tax base we can provide with constrained geography. We have a lake, we have mountains, there's nowhere to go but up. It's a geometry problem, it's a geography problem. So I would just encourage you to think long-term and think about the ability of folks to find housing and to find retail and entertainment without having to get in their cars. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Thatcher. Anyone else wish to speak? Come on up, tell us your name, and please fill out a card when you're finished.
How's everyone? My name is Adam Wade, and Miss Sweet, my dad's Stephen Wade, and knows your family, and to the Japanese Church of Christ, I'm your neighbor. I bought the Struve building, and it's something I want to talk about without getting emotional here. I had some big plans to do a big building, and backed off when I learned a little more of the history with that area. It's tough, though, because there's change in life, you know, and change comes. And you've seen the change. Members of the Japanese Church of Christ and the Buddhists and Mrs. Sweet, there's been a lot of change. And when that Stover property sold to the Salt Palace, I think that was somewhat of the start. And I believe this is a ball that's rolling. Let's roll it in the right direction and work together. And I don't know how to say this the right way. You know, it's been a really tough thing for me. You know, you've seen my building sit empty for how long now? It's an expensive building. And I just have to say that I see all sides, and I think that we just need to get together with the Ritchie Group and with the Sweet and the wonderful Japanese community there, and let's work something out, because it's inevitable that something's going to happen. Well, whatever it may be, I think it could be beneficial for everyone. I hope so. That's my wish. So, pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Wade.
Thank you. And where's the card? Do I fill it out?
Cindy Lou there will get you one. Thank you. Anyone else? See, I'm just going to keep asking. Somebody's going to raise their hand. Come on up. You know the drill. Tell us your name. Thank you.
My name is Laura Olson. I'm with the Japanese Church of Christ in Salt Lake. So I grew up at that church because my father was the pastor there for 10 years. And so we lived across the street where now is the parking lot. But this historical church is 100 years old. And when my dad was there is when we built the little part in the back where we have our fellowship hall. And so that's where we have our coffee fellowship and our activities. So when I first grew up there, that place was just booming. We had all these little shops all the way down the street, and all the barber shop and the grocery store, the family market and the manju and all these, the fish market, and then there was the cleaners, several cleaners, and then I got married, moved away, came back, and all of it's gone. All we had left was one street, and that wasn't even designated our street until they decided that the Salt Palace wanted to take half the street away for parking for the convention center. And so they created that Japanese Preservation Committee just to save one little street. And to have this hotel that high, it really will shadow the little teeny street that we have now. And I just don't think we need it that high. Okay,
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Anyone else? See, there we go. Come on up.
My name is Brad Kramer. I'm the pastor at the Japanese Church of Christ. I do want to thank you for hearing us again. Just very briefly, I do want to say that I've been the pastor for 8 years. I've been involved beyond that with the Japanese American community and in a number of different facets. And I've become familiar with a little bit of the history concerning Japantown specifically. And just to add to what Laura Olson said, these are an honorable people that have been here for over a century. The church has been here for 100 years in Japantown. Most of the people I know have done nothing but give and give to the community. And they have found over the course of, well, 100 years, much has been taken from them. Someone spoke of the long-term view tonight in terms of progress and providing for various important aspects of transportation, I guess, and growth in the city, and I understand that. But there will be no long-term view for the Japanese American community in Japantown if developments like this continue to go unchecked. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. And please do fill out a card. Anyone else? Then I'll look for a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that the council close the public hearing and defer action to a future council meeting.
I have a motion by Councilmember Luke and a second by Councilmember Rogers. Any discussion to this motion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes, and we are set to take action on December 11th, next Tuesday. That moves us on to B4, which is the ordinance locating utility lines when excavating in the right-of-way. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak to that tonight? I don't have any cards in my hand. Raise your hand if you want to speak to that issue. All right, I'll look for a motion.
Madam Chair, I move the council close the public hearing and defer action to a future council meeting.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Rogers, a second by Councilmember Luke. Any discussion to this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes. We're set to take action again December 11th. And then our final public hearing tonight is on an ordinance regarding open space signs zoning text amendment. I do have a few cards. Actually, I have quite a few cards on this one. Cindy Cromer will start us off, followed by Mike Trabert.
You have a letter from me that was hastily drafted this morning. I apologize for its tardiness. Oh, my name is Cindy Cromer. I think the thing I want to focus on is the history that Salt Lake City has with decluttering its corridors and its gateways. It has a substantial role in leadership on this issue. Going back many years, I mentioned Alan Hardman's tenure on this council representing District 4. The story that you probably don't know is that the billboard that used to be on top of the brewery was removed because Alan would not let the site, headed for being a bed and breakfast, become a cultural register without the removal of the billboard. That's the first thing I remember about the city's leadership. And Ralph Becker stepped up both when he was on the Planning Commission and throughout his service at the state capitol, and then again as mayor. We have a bank for stockpiling billboards, and the city has provided tremendous leadership on decluttering. This is clutter. Even though there are good people who are part of this club and they want to keep it going, it is clutter in our open space zone, and making this change on a citywide basis is a can of worms. I brought the worms. And I think you've all received the cartoon of Zermuggy's corollary to Murphy's Law, which is that when you open a can of worms and then decide you need to get them back in the can, you have to have a bigger can. So I'm very concerned about the lack of definition. I'm gravely concerned about the appearance that the city's doing an about-face with respect to billboards and signage on our corridors and gateways. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cromer. Mike Trabert is up next, followed by Jan Haug.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Mike Trabert. I'm the tennis manager at the Salt Lake Tennis and Health Club. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a feel of the history of the club, just so you can see what a vital role it plays in our community, in the tennis community, and our community in general. The club started in 1912 on the Victory Courts on 10th East, and then it eventually moved over by Forestdale on 9th East for several years, and then in 1963 it moved over to its current location in Sugar House by Highland High School. It's got a lot of history to the facility. There have been a lot of national events, national tournaments. A lot of very well-known tennis players have come through that club. So it's a really important facility for us in the tennis community. Once we lost the Canyon Racquet Club, which is by the mouth of Big Cottonwood Canyon, we lost a lot of indoor courts, outdoor courts, and it was a big blow to the tennis community in Salt Lake. So it's important that we're able to keep this club alive, and really we need to do that by generating a lot of memberships. We got so much interest and we got a lot of calls and things when we were building our new 30,000 square foot facility, fitness facility at the club, and the sound walls were down, and people were driving on I-80 and they had no idea a club was there. We got calls saying we didn't know you had a pool, tennis courts. So we got a lot of memberships from that. So it's important that we can hopefully maintain the signage that we have, and I'm in favor of the size of the signage that the club is requesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trabert. Jan Haug, tell me if I said your name wrong, please, and Jan will be followed by Laurie Lambert.
Thank you, Erin. You did a great job with our name. It
Thank
is
you.
Haug. My name is Jan Haug, and I've been a resident of the Parleys Highland area since I married 35 years ago. And when our first child was born 32 years ago, we were greatly interested in participating as a family in swimming. At this point in time in the area, Fairmont had not been built, and Steiner had not been built, and the only opportunities were two clubs, the JCC on 23rd and 17th, and the tennis club. Both of them had a very long list, a year list, once you applied, and you had to leave a deposit. After a year, we were fortunate to get a call from the tennis club, and we have been there ever since. This has been a family community area. I need to point out that even though we did not have the opportunity to join and be members at that time, we were given the opportunity to participate and have swimming lessons. And that club continues to do that now. The tennis club has been an anchor in the community and supportive of the community. Many scout troops have passed their swimming lessons there, their swimming merit badges there. For tennis, you know, Highland is right there. They have the club has hosted Highland's men's and women's team for practice, for matches, and they have also had the opportunity to host state championships when Liberty Park has been rained out. They have tried to always extend themselves to the community. I've had the privilege to serve on the board. I've also been the PTA president at Highland High, and we have used the club for a lot of things, and it is important to remember that while you may be a member, you still have an opportunity as a community member to take lessons there. So they meet the needs not just of members, but of the community. As you know, recreation for families is very limited in the area. Thank you for your time, and thank you for considering their signage.
Thanks for coming to speak to us, Ms. Haug. Lori Lambert is up next, followed by Greta Spindlove.
Hi, I'm Lori Lambert, Executive Director of Utah Tennis Association. We are the nonprofit arm of the National USTA, and we work with the Salt Lake Tennis and Health Club to bring all sorts of events to the community and to make sure that everyone in the community has the opportunity to play tennis, which is one of the few sports you can play your entire life. This club nearly disappeared 3-4 years ago, and it would have devastated the entire tennis community. We wouldn't have been able to bring in tournaments. We wouldn't have been able to run our leagues. If we lose this club, tennis is decimated in this community. So we need to make sure that the club has every opportunity for people to know that they're here and to know that there's an opportunity to join and play there. They open their doors, like the previous person said, they open their doors to many, many community events, high school tournaments, tournaments for 5-6 different states of players. And we have to make sure that this club has every opportunity to remain healthy, or the entire sport in our community would be killed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lambert. Greta Spendlove, and Greta will be followed by Karen Sato.
Thank you. I'm Greta Spendlove, an attorney for the club. We attended a briefing before the council, before Thanksgiving, and emphasized how vital it was to keep the club, that we have increased signage. And at that meeting, Ms. Mendenhall made a comment that we've been thinking about ever since and trying to decide how to answer. And she said that she hesitated to approve the amendment because every business would be better off if it had more signage. And I'd like to just mention 4 points that we think make this situation really distinctive and show how we're just not really any business when it comes to this signage. First of all, the club is a commercial business, but it also has an important public mission of the training, special training for tennis and fitness, and that's been mentioned. Second, the club has been placed in an impossible situation as a result of historic zoning decisions over which it had no control. Originally, it was part of the Salt Lake Country Club. It was split by the freeway coming in between, and because of that splitting, it was marooned essentially in a residential area. So it is in a position where it's in OS, So it can't get commercial zoning, and yet it really can't be zoned commercial because of its relationship to the residential community. It's also in a hollow, so along 17th East. So really the only place where it can have useful signage is along the freeway. Third, signage is essential to the club's success in performing its mission. The club realized just how essential increased signage was when it removed its previous signs, and sales of membership fell by up to 30%. The zoning change will not have adverse effects. The club is virtually the only non-governmental entity in an OS zone. We need the signage, and would very much appreciate the council approving the zoning amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Spenlove. Karen Sato is the final card that I have on this. If anyone else wishes to speak to it, raise your hand. We'll bring you a card.
Hi, I'm Karen Sato. I'm the general manager of the Salt Lake Tennis Club. Appreciate you hearing us again and all of the comments. I'm very passionate about the cause of the tennis club. I feel like we provide a great service to families. Our mission is to create a place for all to come to achieve health and well-being. I feel very fortunate to watch children run down the hall laughing and giggling, going up to their swimming lessons, going to their tennis lessons. I feel very happy when I see families working out on treadmills together. So I feel that our cause is really important. I feel the fact that we're asking for more signage doesn't really negatively impact much. We're on a freeway. We don't have any neighbors that are really too concerned about it. I know that there's rules and so forth, and I appreciate that. I don't know that we're going to affect a whole lot when we have a small sign up. We would appreciate you considering giving us that opportunity to increase the signage so that people driving by on the freeway can actually see the sign. We feel like we're very important to the community of Sugar House and Salt Lake City. We have members from all over, and we have a lot of non-members. And we're teaching children, and we have scholarship students that we provide opportunities to as well. So we'd appreciate it if you would give us a chance and consider it. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Ms. Sato. Anyone else wish to speak to this item? Seeing none, I'll look for motion.
Madam Chair, I move that the council close the public hearing and defer action to a future council meeting.
I have a motion by Councilmember Wharton, a second by Councilmember Luke. Any discussion to this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that public hearing is closed. We are set to take action next Tuesday, December 11th. Thank you for being with us. Now we're on to Section C, our potential action items. We have the ordinance regarding the inland port zoning text amendment. I'll look for a motion.
Madam Chair,
I could keep talking if you need me to
I don't know what
fill
they're
in.
doing over there, but I'll go ahead and make the motion. I move that the council adopt an ordinance amending various sections of Title 21A of the Salt Lake City Code pertaining to regulation of inland port uses. I further move that the council include the proposed addition to Section 21.34.150.B.2.E, applicability as outlined in the staff report.
Second. Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Johnston and a second by Councilmember Wharton. Any discussion?
I have no idea what that meant.
Well
I don't
done.
either.
Well done, council member.
Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Shiplap? Okay. That ordinance passes.
You didn't do it at the right
We're
time,
on
Aaron.
to Section D, comments. Do we have any questions to our Chief of Staff and Deputy Chief of Staff, Mr. Leary and Mr. Litvak. Anybody? Do you know what shiplap means? I don't know.
If there are no questions, I do want to remind you of the city's holiday party tomorrow and hope you all can make it, so.
Thank you.
Great to see you.
Okay. Now I have time for comments to the city council. So if you would like to make a comment to us that didn't have anything to do with the public hearings we've already had, we want to hear from you. Good thing we've got a couple cards. All right, I have one card here for Joe Scoville. Mr. Scoville, will you tell me if I said your last name wrong when you come up to the mic?
You said it perfectly.
Thank you.
Yes. My name is Joe Scoville. I'm a resident of Midvale. I am part owner of a Garage 94, which is in Sandy, Utah, and it's right next door to the Real Stadium. In 2012, Salt Lake City Public Utilities, on the notice that I passed around to you, I said Public Works, but it was a mistake. Public Utilities constructed a flood control box on our property without our permission, without a single legal right, without any compensation, without a letter, without a telephone call. They went in there, threw the fence down on the ground, got us, told us to get out of the way, and put this huge, huge flood control box, which is there for the protection of this Real soccer stadium. And that was done in January of 2012. In July of 2012, Sandy City, needing to protect that trespass in violation of our land, went and got a quitclaim deed, which I gave you a copy of there, a quitclaim deed saying that they had bought for $15,000 the right to that property where that box was, that flood control box was installed. And they recorded it, and they took our property away from us, and we had to go through a 5 years session, $150,000 in legal fees to get our property quiet title back to us. You have a copy of the decree from the court. We have a court order. I have worked, and I want to say this right now, in regards to Salt Lake City Public Utilities Assistant Director, Jesse Stewart. He's been a perfect gentleman. And in regards to Rusty Vedder, who's with the Salt Lake City Attorney's Office, he's been a perfect gentleman, and I think I made a friend out of him.
Time.
Can I continue? There's nobody else around here, because this is very, very important.
That's the time that we have allowed for public hearings, but we have a bit of information you've shared with us here.
Well,
and
the purpose
wanna-
of me being here is to tell the council that we are going to prepare documents in court to either remove that box, which is a $350,000 box, and take it off our property, or come to an accommodation with us.
And the council isn't in a position to make any kind of negotiations with you, but I
I'm
want to
not
make
asking
sure.
you to do that. I'll put you on notice. That's what I'm here for.
Well, we appreciate you coming to talk to us, and if you wouldn't mind perhaps coordinating with Lehua here in the purple sweater to make sure that we have the right contact information for you and that you do for us as well. And we appreciate you coming out to talk to us tonight.
I appreciate you listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Scoville. I've got another card for Levi Thatcher. And Levi's is the last card, so there's a couple people who haven't talked to us tonight. You can fill one out.
Yeah,
Go
thanks
ahead.
for your time. I understand you're trying to get home. I just want to compliment you. The change is taking place in Salt Lake downtown, the densification, the new apartment units going in. It's really a sight to behold, and it's really encouraging. And as a young family, we want to stay and partake of this density and this exciting environment, but there's so few 3-bedrooms available for any young families that are growing, trying to raise kids. I would encourage you to look to cities like Vancouver, BC, who have required 10% of units, I believe, to be 3 bedrooms or more, to enable young families to stay downtown and put roots down and not be forced out to Harriman and Draper. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Thatcher. Anyone else want to speak to us tonight? All right, then that is the end of our comments to the council section. We have no new business tonight and no unfinished business. Could I get a motion for our consent agenda?
Move for approval.
I've got a motion for approval by Councilmember Luke and a second by Councilmember Rogers. Any discussion to the consent agenda motion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. And the thing passes. With that, we are adjourned. Is that too loud, Charlie?